And this is not a commercial. It really isn't. I use Identifix for years. I've had many of my students, guys like you out there, using Identifix. And I'm going to show you some neat things that you could find going through here. Some case studies I put in, some case studies since I've been working all over the place that the guys from Identifix, especially Guy Dibble, who's been very, very helpful in putting some of these things together. So with that being said, we're going to do find and fix faster your path to more profit, because that's the name of the game, right? Path to more profit. Now, what will be covered from about 7:30, which we're a few minutes past that right now, till about 9 o'clock. And of course, your questions, we'll do some stuff live if you'd like as well. We're going to diagnose and repair vehicles faster by doing this. We're going to look at some real case studies that can reduce non-billable work time, boost customer trust and satisfaction, increase tech confidence and productivity, and keep your shop profitable. That's the biggie, keeping your shop profitable. So let's take a look at this. Here we got an example for a 2001 Nissan, and you should have slides on your screen. The slides that are on your screen are probably a lot easier to read than what I have here, okay? So we're going to look at this no start maximum. And you could go crazy with no starts, right? There's a lot of different things that could start, that cause a no start. And here, when we look at this no start, it could be a crank sensor, it could be fuel, it could be spark, but basically, when we go through this list of punching in no start on a 2001 Nissan, it comes up with some real good information and quick hits. The quick hits, the fix is really removing the transmission, which is kind of tough. But you guys should all have a pair of jumper cables around in the shop. And if you move the ground around, especially here, moving the ground to one of the starter bolts and having it start right up will really end your frustration level, okay? But sometimes I'd rather not even bother doing that. I want to know how I can diagnose and fix this car quick. I'm going to take the big starter cables, just one side, either the two reds or the two black. We'll say two black to make it easier. I'm going to dig it into the positive post of the battery, and then I'm going to put this down on the engine near the starter. And I'm going to dig it in real good so we don't have VD, voltage drop, because that's what causes this. Two dissimilar metals, obviously the bell housing, the bolts, and the engine not making a good ground gives us this no start condition. So, pretty neat information on this hit from Identifix. Try to work on this yourself and see if you were able to come up with this. You'd be probably messing around for quite a few hours rather than just clicking on Identifix. Does anyone have any questions out there on this? I think the slide is a little bit easier to see than looking up here. Okay? So, any questions? No. Okay, so let's move on. Now, here's another one, a 2005 Nissan Xterra no start. Okay? And you can see here when you punch it in, you get all the different vehicles that it kind of gives you. Frontiers, Xterra, Pathfinder, and it tells you no start, malfunction indicator lamp is flashing while cranking. No codes. That's the stuff that kills you. No codes. No DTCs at all. Okay? So this Xterra, and it sometimes bucks like it's out of time. So you may get something that it seems to be almost like a timing chain type of problem. Again, look at the time-saving factors here. We charge for our time, and our time is money, right? Well, here, you got a lot of experts that, guys like yourselves, people that already subscribe to Identifix, send information in when they're working on a hotline. They have technicians out in Minnesota that really work on cars, that really know what they're doing, okay? I know some of these guys, and they do one hell of a job, okay? So here, you could even pop up this attachment, shows us the fuse box, because if we read through this, it says a flashing check engine light while cranking is usually a sign that there is a voltage supply problem from the ECM relay. The ECM relay failure is common cause for this problem. The ECM relay is located in the instrument power distribution or IPOM. The IPOM is in the engine compartment, okay? And it tells you it has fuses and relays in it. So it gives you the information, it tells you where it is, and tells you what to do. It says, pushing the tabs on the right side of the IPOM to pull the IPOM up from its holder. So you're going to lift it right up from the holder. There's a row of 4 relays in this box, okay? And it tells you at a 45-degree angle. And basically, this relay could give us this no start problem. Let's move the slide to the next one. So here we could click on it, okay, expand what the wiring diagram looks like and what more information could be on it. Now what could be easier than this? And that's really what I'm trying to get a point across here. What can be easier than you looking something up, punching it in? You know, always the most important tools you have, your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your hands. You take a visual look. You've already questioned the customer, or the service writer or shop owner should have done that first. But as a technician, we need to use all our tools. And we could use those tools to look around, see if something looks funny. Did someone add a part to a car? Is there bad corrosion at the battery, a bad voltage drop at the battery cable? Looking at these things. Well, this one is not like the Maxima we looked at, remember? The Maxima had a bad ground. This one has a bad relay. And this is OE diagrams. This is actually OE information that you can get on Identifix. You can also get labor times. We'll go through something because we have so many examples here. We're going to give you some Asian ones, a couple of European ones, a domestic one, and then we'll ask what you would like to see. Okay. So here we go in and it tells us exactly where this power distribution module is. Engine room, meaning here. It gives you the factory stuff, so just like you were working for the dealer, we actually get to see the diagram. And now you're able to fix the vehicle. Let's look at this Mazda, and again, with help from guys like you out there, okay, this Mazda, someone actually even sent the picture in. The picture here shows the buildup, okay, and this one is a P0400. P0400, you guessed it, it's an EGR valve, okay? And an EGR valve that has a problem. So it tells you here to remove the throttle body from the intake and inspect the EGR ports in the intake. You're looking for them to be plugged, and this little arrow right here on your slide, you can see that port is all plugged up. Now I'm going to give you a little hint here what you should really do. You know, you could go and get yourself some little wire brushes that work real good to clean some of these holes out. Some picks, like your Mac or Snap-on pick, to try to break some of the carbon. Spray some intake cleaner, like BG or Run Right or Wins, something down in that hole and work it. In other words, get the pick in here, scrape at it, spray a little more in. Remember, be careful spraying liquid. We do not want to do what? You guessed it. Hydrostatic lock something. If you hydrostatic lock something, obviously it's going to be a major problem. Okay? So, right here it says, good archive with a picture here. They have a reference from a repair tech bulletin that actually tells them that the repair track bulletin 7620 gives you more information on this problem, but cleaning the carbon out is actually a good thing to do to fix this P0400. Okay. Any questions on those three that we went through? Nothing? Okay. So hopefully you guys are getting that this could be super helpful. Let's take another look here at something different. This is a 2006 Toyota Tundra, another no start. Now this no start says a timing belt was installed, now the engine will not crank over or start. Well, there's nothing worse than that, right? You're going to do the job and maybe someone even drove the car in for you, right? So you're not 100% sure, like, did this thing really run? You start questioning yourself. Well, of course it did. That's how someone got it in your bed. But believe me, I've been there where sometimes you're like, you're not 100% sure that that was an issue. So We have this here. It is a no crank, no start. So it comes down and it tells you what the mileage said, 136,000. So we know when we have a lot of miles, that's a problem. Test and procedures. Locate the crankshaft position sensor connected on the driver front cylinder head. Okay, that's camshaft, excuse me. Disconnect the connector for the camshaft position sensor and then turn the ignition switch on. Check there now to see if the check engine light illuminates on the dash. So what you're doing in OBD2, what happens? When we do an open circuit, this is part of what we call the comprehensive component monitor. You know, the thing that always says it's ready. Well, when you do an open, it's going to see 5 volts most likely. That's what most vehicles look at. 5 volts should give us a check engine light on. The cam sensor is shorted, okay? We disconnect the cam sensor, check engine light came on, and the engine would not crank over. So this guy here, this guy Brad who put this in, and the people from Identifix, they basically have given you a head start on how to figure out why this thing, no crank, no start on a cam sensor. You can look at TSBs. Notice here, with OEM direct wiring diagrams, components, TSBs, and R&R procedures. So you actually have all the dealer information as well as all these quick hits from Identifix. Okay. And you could go down, there's a lot of different problems that people would say, and you notice camshaft, 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 camshaft harness. Could we have a harness problem and not necessarily a bad sensor? Of course. So you need to check both. One thing that I would recommend, excuse me, I mention a lot VD, voltage drop. Very, very important. That means it's a poor connection. Sometimes when we get this type of mileage, 130-something thousand, what's going to happen? The little seal that is going to the connection for the cam sensor, in this case, it's worn out, it's bad, maybe antifreeze got in, water got in, maybe you have corrosion starting to build. Here's what you should buy. You should buy Stabilant 22. Stabilant 22 from Napa, it's CE, Charlie Edwards 1, that's CE1, or SL, Sam Larry, excuse me, not Sally. Same thing, it is an S. Sam Larry 5 from CarQuest, SL5 from CarQuest. So that's something really good. How many of you guys out there are actually using that to clean up a problem? A lot of different OEs, by the way. They have given these bottles out on some Volkswagens, some Mazdas, and many other car manufacturers that had voltage drop problems. Do we have any questions? No questions yet. You guys are an easy crowd. Okay. Let's look at a Lexus, a 2000 Lexus RX 300 with P0330. Okay. So here we got a knock sensor problem. Now, a nice thing here with this knock sensor problem, look at their archives. When I pop this in, when I put 330 in the search box after I selected the car, and you can see this again better on your slide, most likely than looking through the camera. Okay? You should be able to view both of them. Again, if you want the picture big, you want to stare at me or the big screen, you're more than welcome. You can click on it, double click makes it big. There's a place to make it back to small size. So here we have a whole bunch of different confirmed fixes. Look at this. Confirmed fix. 32 had knock sensor problems, and I can tell you I've come across this problem. 27 knock sensor sub-harness and knock sensor problem. So there goes that harness problem. And by the way, what do we do when we unplug and then plug in? Don't we clean things up like voltage drop? Sure we do. And that is the biggie. We're cleaning it up. That's where that SL5 or CE1, excuse me, Stabilant 22 comes in handy. 9 confirmed fixes that bank 2 knock sensor was a problem. 8 confirmed fixes that bank 2 knock sensor and the harness was a problem. 5 knock sensor sub-problems, 1 harness, and 1 harness and sensor. So what they do, they archive all of these. And what I always look at when I'm looking on Identifix, I look for something that's common. they're saying something about a knock sensor. Do you know how to test a knock sensor? Well, you could use a scope, which would definitely confirm when you're actually taking something like a 1/2-inch drive extension, tapping slightly where in the knock sensor area, are we creating an AC voltage? Okay? And I believe in this one here, yes, on next slide, look at this what they archived for you. Some tech would do the same thing I did, okay? Which, what I just told you. Take something and don't bang on it too hard. Don't get the BFH out, the big frickin' hammer, and pop a hole in the intake manifold or a cylinder head, right? We're going to tap down on it, and you notice you got two scope patterns. Here's bank 1. Look at the frequency. Look at the frequency. That's the amount of time something happens in a second. Look at bank 2 knock sensor. Pretty low. Small, not big, okay? So the difference is a good knock sensor is going to create what type of voltage? That's right, very good. AC voltage, okay? AC voltage that when you're tapping on it, it is actually going to create a AC waveform. If the amplitude, what's amplitude? Amplitude is the voltage hike. If the amplitude is too small like this, that knock sensor is not sending the information to the computer. Okay. Another thing you should know about knock sensors. How about if we have an engine noise? You know, a lot of vehicles out there have variable valve timing. We'll be talking about an example later on. But people don't put the right amount of oil in, small amount of oil, wrong type of oil in. Well, what winds up happening? If we get an engine noise like we got something banging, well, guess what it's going to do to timing? The knock sensor picks up a frequency. It takes the AC voltage, goes through the PCM, gets converted to a digital DC in the analog to digital converter, or sometimes called A to D converter, most commonly called. And guess what? Then it gives the computer that information in its lookup tables and says, hey, we may be pinging a little bit. What are we going to do? We're going to retard timing. What could the owner of the vehicle encounter or feel? What symptoms? The symptoms could be a loss of power. Okay? That could be all from a knock sensor. Now here, I don't know if I have to go back. Let's see if we had any symptom. Okay. Just besides the code. No, this one just had a code on this knock sensor setup. And here's some of the potential causes as well. ECM ground supply, knock sensor, or wiring. So very, very important. Now, do you guys out there have any questions, anything you'd like to add, any little war stories you want to share with everyone? Has Identifix been helpful to you if you're using it? Okay. Very, very important tool to have. Okay. So again, good high frequency is good, the red one is bad. And by the way, this is not something they put in special. This is in their archives. This is already there. Okay? So when you give them information, they put it in there so we can help each other. Remember, more heads are better than one head, correct? And I always say, you know, each and every one of you out there knows something I don't know something the next guy don't know. If we share our information, wow, we got a lot going on. And Identifix does just that. Okay, let's look at this coil. Oh, question?
What voltage scale are you on for knock sensor?
Oh, what voltage scale are we on for knock sensor? Well, this looks like a pico scope to me. I'm going to be on AC volts, so you need to couple your scope to AC, not DC. Okay? This particular scope, he may have went into a preset. You know, some of these scopes have presets. Now, the voltage scale, I got to stare at my computer screen. I'm half blind here. It looks like it's probably a volt or two. Maybe the screen that you're looking at is probably clearer than what's being even projected here. So I would set up my lab scope in millivolts. 1,000 millivolts make 1 volt. Or if you got a Modus or something, 1 volt per screen. AC, not DC. Make sure you check AC. If it's too big where it's off the screen, then what you do is make it higher voltage. And when you make it higher voltage, it'll bring it down. Playing the comparison game, and thank you for the question, I appreciate it. Playing the comparison game is very important. What do I mean by that? If I know if it looks like this, if it's good, and then I know it looks like that, if it's bad, it's real easy to compare. And look here, could we see a difference between these two? And this is nice because this picoscope, which again, what it looks like to me, I'm not sure, but the way the scaling and everything looks like pico. And you could use any scope. It could be OTC, it could be Snap-on, it could be E-scope, whatever. When you have different colors to compare and you're on the same voltage scale on both of them. By the way, I've seen people put one on one voltage scale, let's say a lower voltage scale, and that would make it look higher, and the other one on a higher voltage scale that would make it look lower. We want it what? That's right, we want it at the same scaling, and again on AC volts. Hopefully that answered your questions. Any other questions or comments?
Why not look at the scan data?
Ah.
Not present, yes, no.
Very good. Someone brought up, why not look at the scan data? Yes, no. Well, if you have the scan data, that's always a good thing to look at. You know, I always believe in actually looking at the easiest thing first, but how many times that scan data is not available on everyone that has different scan tools? That PID may not be there. PID, the parameter identification for knock sensor as far as it's working, okay? Here you got a code for it, and if you wanted to play the comparison game, sometimes that yes or no is merely yes or no, and it's not giving us amplitude of the signal. This may even be a yes. It does have some voltage above zero and below its zero line. So what I would say to that, yes, you're absolutely correct. Check the scan data, it's a lot easier. But many cases, scan data is not accurate. You've all heard of limp home mode, backup mode, substituted values. I would definitely back it up if you had a problem with a scope. Remember, we test, not guess. Okay? Next question.
Does knock sensor always light the check engine lamp?
Ah. The question was, does a knock sensor always light the check engine light? Well, not always, but a lot more frequently now compared to years ago. So the newer the vehicle, you can almost bet your life that it would set it. Here's a good example, you know, while I'm looking at Asian cars here. Nissan with electronic motor mounts. You go back, I think it's before 2005, Nissans with electronic motor mounts, they go bad, and you won't know. You'll get a drivability issue and burn something out in the computer because you have low electrical resistance. That's when the solenoid goes bad. And low electrical resistance equals high amperage. You burn that part of the computer out. People were cutting wires. They cut the wire and the check engine light would never come on. Newer Nissans, they monitor that system right away and the light would come on. So just an example, sometimes the light may not come on, but most newer vehicles, yes. 2000 is not all that new just yet. Any other questions? Very good. And I really do want to thank you. You're paying attention and coming up with suggestions or questions. I appreciate it. Like I said, we all know something. If we share, we're out to help someone else. Okay? And by the way, one other thing for the gentleman who asked or commented with the scan data. If we do have good scan data, we don't want to just look at yes or no. Could we graph it? And even though that's a yes-no, we could graph it going no maybe a down line, yes maybe an up line, or vice versa. And we could see if it was switching. Like when you're going near it, is it giving us knock sensor? Yes, no. It'd be better if they gave us voltage. But some scan tools do, some don't. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. Let's look at another Toyota. P0500. Now a little different on this. I gave a little different view. We go in with this 500. We got to look at what the symptom is. It says vehicle speed signal. Now, this is one I really like to use. How many of you guys out there work on Fords? Because Ford had problems with something called the PSOM. The PSOM is a little digital chip that basically gives you miles per hour and your odometer reading. It's a conversion from analog signals to digital to make your speedometer work. Nissan used the same thing, and here we got a code dealing with vehicle speed. The point I want to bring across is how many of you have the vehicle in park in your shop, in park, and then all of a sudden you've seen what? The speedometer go up. And it looks like you're driving somewhere, but you're not. And could this cause a bunch of problems? You bet. Could we have fuel delivery change because it thinks it has speed? Yeah. Could we have other things like maybe timing and besides fuel delivery, air intake change? Yeah. These are things to look at. So let's take a look at this. Here we look at the code. It basically tells us what could be the problem. You know, things to look for on reference voltage. Reference voltage usually 5 volts, sometimes 8, 9, 10, or 12, depending on the manufacturer. This one is a 5 volt reference, they tell you right there. It says the speedo head could be faulty or not have 5 volt square wave signal. Okay. You also have here, if there is a purple, and I can't read, a purple yellow wire, check for the signal at the powertrain control module, PCM. The signal should be there, and if it's not, it tells us what to do. And then you can go down into all of the OE information besides the fix. Okay? So the next thing we do, I pop the screen up and I can get into the manufacturer stuff, including this little piece here on the bottom. I want you to look at the lower left-hand slide of the slide. Notice here, this is code set and criteria. Code set and criteria on this 2000 Toyota Sienna P0500, okay, is basically showing us how the code could be set. This is very important. You know, I always like bringing this up in class. If it tells you the code only sets when you're doing X amount miles per hour, X amount load on it, why are you testing the car in your bay, in park, going broom, broom, broom? Is that going to help you find the problem? No. And the other thing I'd like to bring up here, we should be looking at these DTCs in generic or global OBD2. Generic or global. Then you could go into manufacturer, like if you have the Toyota tech screen, which, by the way, I want to remind you, you can go to NASTF, National Automotive Task Force, and you could go to the Toyota website for $55 for 3 days. You could download the Toyota scan tool. You will need a DrewTech Mongoose cable or a J2534 device, so you could use it as a tool. Full function, just like the dealer, okay? There's some problem with security code if you're not a registered locksmith, which you can do in certain states. You find that information out at nastf.org. You could also, from there, download all the factory information from Scion, Toyota, and Lexus. So that is also important. Now, do we have a question?
Always check freeze frame data.
Ah, very good. Someone took the words out of my mouth. This is why we use generic global. Always use freeze frame data. So if it told us we were doing 21 miles an hour, we had 13% load, the TP, the throttle angle, throttle position angle, was at 15%, you know, engine coolant and so on, yes, we need to look at freeze frame data. How many of you guys out there, how many of you techs are actually printing this out? You're not printing it out, just what I thought. A lot of these tools that are PC-based, you could save screenshots. If you have a tool like a, you know, an older type of scan tool, maybe even an old Launch X431, because the GDS, the new ones, you could save it. You have something that doesn't have that capability or print capability, you all have a smartphone or regular phone with a camera, don't you? Take a picture of freeze frame, it's going to help you. And don't forget to look at freeze frame even if there are no DTCs or pending DTCs in the vehicle. We still could have a freeze frame, couldn't we? A code could have cleared out, but the freeze frame is still there for a while. Any other comments? Okay. So let's continue looking on here. We can see that possible causes. It tells us connectors. It tells us that the ECM could have failed. It tells us the cluster could be bad. It tells us the conditions, setting conditions, that the engine speed has to be about 2,300 RPMs, okay? And it gives you all the information right there of what you need to go down and look at. So, really a nice setup. And look at this, I clicked on the wiring diagram. Didn't color this in, this is actual stuff that they have right on their website. So when you go to Identifix, and you could blow this up, I don't know if you can see this up here, but you could make that 136%, it looks like. I could make that a couple of 100%. I could print this all out. I could save this. And I could follow through here to see, you know, IG, ignition 2, and we can see what the ignition switch is on or off, trace the wires out to the components, and see what's going on. Okay. Now here's one that I used the Vancom, the Rostec. This Rostec tool is an example of a European car now, not an Asian car. We just did a bunch of Asian cars. So now I wanted to switch it up. So it's a vehicle that I worked on, and using the Rostec scan tool, it's pretty neat because it comes up not only with all the fault codes, gives you the engine size, all the information. You can print, clear, do everything you want. But look at the 5 codes. It came up with the manufacturer code, and I do want to remind you, if you punch this code in Identifix, let's say you have a scan tool that didn't say a 16804 is a P0420, guess what? You will find the information, it'll decode it for you, it'll come up, say 420. I'll show you an example because I punched it in just a little while ago, okay? Now, this car has a 420, it has a P3266, which is a oxygen sensor problem, a 300, a 302, and a 304. Where do you start? Where do you start? Well, it'd be a good idea to tackle Misfire first, right? And Misfire is really coming from the crank sensor reading information, isn't it? When we get a misfire, the crankshaft speed slows up somewhat, and we could then identify cylinders like 2 and 4. Random means it's misfiring all over the place. And the O2 sensor being a problem, well, it could be we were dumping so much fuel down on these Volkswagens that could cause that P0420, kill the O2 and kill the cat. By the way, I do want to remind you, in here as well, in Identifix, we have something called TSBs, Technical Service Bulletins, that all you guys know about. You can look them up. Do you realize that most Volkswagens for P0420, there is a bulletin, you can get a free catalytic converter for your customer. Not on all of them, but on many of them. So it's something you should look at. Any questions on that? Now, we could have used a Snap-on or something else over here, or OTC. It's your choice. This tool by Rostec, it just does Volkswagen and Audi. I kind of like it. The other tool that I would use on European is Autodata. It does a great job. Super great job. Very easy to use as well. Now, I went into generic global OBD2. I call this the Bernie tool, but for you people that don't know the Bernie tool, this is called eScan. eScan is generic. So my buddy Bernie has a really great tool here because here's some of the things that I like. Number one, I can tell on the bottom right, monitors are complete. Monitors that are not complete, guess what? I won't be able to get a code if monitors are not complete, right? It's like if I turn my back on you and you guys flip me to bird, well, I'm not going to know you flipped me to bird, right? But if I'm looking at you, and I can see you out there in TV land, not one kidding, I can't really see it. Someone else who's at the controls, Doreen could see it, but I can't see it. Anyway, that's more than you needed to know, right? At any rate, what I'm trying to tell you here is I could look at this like a monitor, and if there's a code, when the monitor's ready, it's going to come up with a code. If it's not ready, it ain't going to come up with a code. The nice thing is, even with this Rostec, I could run all of the monitors and check them by following the prompts on the scan tool. And yes, you could do it through Snap-on and OTC. and Launch and other tools, and Autoland Scientech. You can do it through all these other tools. I got a bunch of different tools, so I know it works. That way, when the monitors are ready, you could come up with these codes. If they're not ready, we can't come up with codes. So, let's look here, and I want to go over a few things besides the monitors. It tells us we got DTCs. It tells us our charging voltage is good, which is very important. It also tells us and warns us here, we got a yellow warning light. Warm, too slow. Now, you may not think about thermostats, and I told you this is just not going to be a commercial for Identifix. I'm going to give you some bits of information, okay, because that's what I do. I don't do commercials. I use Identifix, and any of you guys that know me, plenty of my students that sat in this class own Identifix, as well as techs I've done all over the country. I highly recommend it, okay? But that being said, let's get back to what I want to get the point across. Thermostats. How many times you've put in a white box thermostat? Well, yeah, you got heat in the car, and I was just teaching up in Canada telling these guys on their inspection program, pretty much the same thing. I don't care if your butt is warm, okay? What I do care is, just like the PCM cares, what is the time that that thermostat actually opened to reach a particular temperature? And if it didn't get there in time, guess what? You got a problem, okay? And that could cause codes, it could cause monitors from not running, it could cause a whole bunch of stuff. How many of you seen electronically controlled thermostats? It's not new, it is out there. It's been out there, okay? So why do they do that? Remember the old oxygen sensors we had? We had no heater on them, the car went out of closed loop, back into open loop. Well, guess what? Same thing here. They know that the thermostat is that critical. It's that critical it has to work right. So he has that in the tool. Fuel trim. Ta-da! That's the thing I really love. Fuel trim is my friend. And that being said, let's look at a couple of things here. Engine temperature, 76 centigrade, basically a 1.9 factor ratio. So if you didn't have it in centigrade, you know, you basically configured it out, double it to make it easier for you, add about 30, and you can tell we're up at operating temperature. Look at short-term fuel trim. Short-term fuel trim is trying to take away a negative 25%. Long-term, the most important thing, is giving us some skew answer here at, it's adding 1.5, okay? We have an air-fuel wide-range sensor in milliamps. We can see that it's a negative 1.41 milliamps, okay? Which means, when we look at a air-fuel ratio sensor, a negative number means it's adding fuel, a positive number means it's taking fuel away. It's just opposite. So here, we have a command on there, or not a command, a sense of, we're going to tell the computer to start adding fuel, start adding fuel with a negative number rather than taking it away. So these things contradict each other. And sometimes you got to race the motor up, look at everything completely, and see why it's confused or mixed up. Could be because of this thermostat problem. Okay. Now we're going to look at what Identifix says here. There's a 2002 Volkswagen Jetta, and you could have a check engine light on for this. And when I punched this one in, I did put the manufacturer code up, and it'll give you the codes here, check engine light on. Oh, P0171 gives you the manufacturer code, gives you some other codes. It'll tell you everything to do. Go down the checklist. You know, what is the fuel pressure? Okay. Look at map. Look at, and by the way, don't forget barrel settings. Mass air, did they go bad on Volkswagen? You bet they go bad on Volkswagen. We've replaced a lot of them, right? And you remember when it was so expensive and then the manufacturer dropped the price on them, practically to nothing? And the Volkswagen ones you can't clean, right? This is not a hot wire setup, so you're not going to be able to clean it. You're going to need to check it and replace it. So it gives us all the information. We can click on all the codes and wind up diagnosing and fixing a car. A lot of these Volkswagens have problems with what? Well, some of them, I'll give you a couple of tidbits, have the vacuum hose for the air, secondary air system. What happens with the secondary air system? The vacuum hose breaks. Secondary air is only supposed to go upstream before the catalytic converter, okay, when the vehicle is cold. Once it's hot, vacuum that's going to it shuts off the air from blowing upstream and diverts it under the hood. Many of these, you know what happens? It keeps blowing air there. You're going to get a P0 171, sometimes even a 174, or these other codes. Remember we had a CAT code too? And the oxygen sensor was not plausible, meaning not right. Here's a little trick. When you see that, remember it goes back again to basics, basics, basics. Looking at information is great, but how about using this? How about using the brain? Pull the dipstick out and smell it, and you'll smell gasoline. Take the dipstick to a safe area in case you got a poor sense of smell. Take it and put a match under it. When you see the dipstick go on fire, and again, do it in a safe place. I'm not responsible when you blow your butt up, okay? Nor is Identifix. Little disclaimer there, just in case, okay? At any rate, when you do that, now you know you have a lot of gas in there. The fix would be, on that particular scenario, make sure the vacuum hose, which is a common problem, is fixed so you can divert air under the car rather than going upstream. And change your oil and filter. And do nothing else. Do not erase the code. Again, I want to remind you, do not erase the code. Leave it in there. Because if you fix the car, that light is going to go out when you drive it. Okay? Most vehicles will do that. There's some that may not, but most will. So drive the vehicle and let the light go out by itself. Now, that being said, if this was going on, because you know people see a check engine light and they put the picture of the wife, the cat, the dog, the husband, whatever, more stuff than I need to look at to cover the light because it annoys them at night, right? So if they're driving around month after month, you're dumping a lot of fuel in there, and what winds up happening? That's why you get a 420 code on these, okay? So there's some big tidbits of information. I'm going to take a question or two right now. Thank you.
They also have a PCV hose and wave problems that cause mixture problems. It may show up as a brake booster sensor code.
Very good. Someone said they also have a PCV hose. They do have a lot of rubber hose, so you guys, I can tell, working on Volkswagens. Don't worry, I got something coming up right on a check valve as well on a different Volkswagen. Very, very good. Thank you for that tidbit. Did everyone understand what he said? It basically PCV hose that does the same type of problem. Thank you. Another comment or question?
No.
So a Volkswagen guy out there. Okay, here's one I love to use. This here is a 1996 Mazda Protege, and it had a problem not setting monitors to ready. This was up in Massachusetts, and the information from the technician states that he was trying to set monitors for weeks. The vehicle owner already had taken it to the dealer. Actually, 2 dealers. They replaced parts on this car too. The state told the vehicle owner that they could not issue a waiver because this vehicle was not on the monitor exemption list. Now, you know, in certain states or jurisdictions, I should say, because up in Canada, where I'm doing some work in Ontario, they have pretty much the same thing, a $450 waiver. You spend $450 and it's okay. The problem here was this car belonged to a cop, and he brought this thing to 2 different dealers before it went to the independent guy. And they couldn't get the monitors to run to pass it. They cleared it. They even installed a new oxygen sensor, performed a complete engine diagnosis, and guess what else they did? They were replacing parts left and right. They put on this tool that says it can set monitors on a car. Don't waste your money. Did you hear me? Don't waste your money. There's no way a monitor can set from any tool unless the manufacturer has programmed it into the PCM. Okay? Just like the Volkswagen, I told you, the Volkswagen, you can do it from multiple tools. Because Volkswagen, Nissan, and of course their sister companies, Audi and Infiniti, they allow you to run all their monitors there. BMW can do some monitor run checks. You can do some on Chrysler. GM, you all know the Bay test for EVAP and so on. But otherwise, it's impossible. Please don't waste your money. Anyone that tells you that, it's far from the truth.
Question. When driving after repair, does the monitor have to run before the check engine light goes off?
The question was, after repair, does the monitor have to run before the check engine light goes off? Well, once a monitor is ready, it's always ready. So you're not really running the monitor. What you're doing is running code setting criteria or monitor setting condition. So that criteria that you're running is like the same freeze frame data we discussed before, the temperature, engine coolant, air intake, miles per hour, load. All this stuff, if it falls in that 15% window, 15%, it could be here, 50% lower, 15% higher, guess what? If it's in the 15% window, then it will start erasing the code. After it goes down the road, it starts going, hey, this thing looks good, turn the light off. It'll do that, 40 more times for key cycles or warm-ups, I should say, and actually take it out. And the warm-up is a cold engine going up to hot temperature or 80 complete type of trips. So it will erase. Now, there are some that don't work like that. In fact, the lovely lady reading the questions to me, Doreen, my stepdaughter, as I call her, fake daughter actually, but at any rate, Janice had a problem with her Honda. Her Honda was on the LIE and something came up and broke her rear O2 sensor. Not a problem, right? Pretty easy. I put a new O2 sensor in the vehicle from Honda, and guess what? Even their information, and this is factory info, said just drive the car and the light will go out. Now this was a pretty early 2000 type of car. I don't remember the exact year now, it's years ago. And guess what? The light did not go out on that car. So I do want to warn you about that. Most of the times, leave the codes in there. This will tell you if you did the job right or not. In this case, well, it wouldn't work for some reason. It was something in the PCM that programming needed to actually see it cleared out. When I drove it in the training center here, after putting about 500 miles on his baby, all I did was pull it in. I went to erase the codes. I didn't even start the car up. I cleared the code, shut the key off, put the key on. 3 monitors went to ready without even me starting the car, because this was something that they had programmed into their PCM. The monitors that went were the O2 heater, the O2 sensor, and the catalyst monitor. And believe me, I didn't even run this car. So very, very good question. Any other questions? Very good. So there's a bunch of stuff right there. So this Mazda, problem running it. Now, here's that tool we were talking about. This tool here, sold as a monitor problem solver. And I'm not here to knock the tool, I'm just here to make your job easier. I don't want you getting something that may not work for you. And their analysis showed it had an oxygen sensor, as you can see. These were screenshots that we took. You can see the incomplete monitors, okay? Only one monitor complete already. Bank 1 oxygen sensor 2 voltage not switching. NPL 1022, that's a PH2 code. That's not a code we would find on OBD2. But they gave me that code right there, and it said, Bank 1 oxygen sensor 2 voltage not switching. Okay, Bank 1 sensor 2 voltage not switching. Well, first of all, Bank 1, okay, isn't that, where number 1 cylinder is? It is a 4-banger anyway. And it says sensor 2 voltage not switching. Well, I think there was some sort of a problem here, a mistake, because we don't want the rear O2 switching, do we? No. And do you see, we have an oxygen sensor heater complete, but not the oxygen sensor. So I'm not even sure how it comes up with that information, but I'm not here to knock them, I'm just telling you what I found. Here we have the oxygen sensor switching, and this is on a OBD2 collector type of tool. And we can see it's graphing, kind of crude graphing. We can see O2 sensor 1, Bank 1 sensor 1, and O2 sensor 2, Bank 1 sensor 2. So here's the front one, here's the rear one. Guess what I'm doing? You hear my foot? I'm doing this to the pedal. I'm seeing the front go up and I'm seeing the back move as well. And that'll happen because guess what? Catalytic converter cannot clean everything up. Now, we looked on it on the Snap-on Solus. Good tool. Do we see it switching up and down? Do you see when I stopped going up and down with the RPM, you can see the fuel trim here. You can see both of them moving. Look at the rear O2 sensor. When I'm going up and down with the pedal like this, my front's going up and down, sensor looks good. By the way, it was new. So was the rear one. The rear one's going up and down, and as soon as I kept it steady, what happened? When I go at a steady state, the rear O2 sensor should not switch up and down, should it? Of course not. So there was no problem here with the O2 sensors or the catalyst. Now, here's where it gets super duper important. Your screen is blank on purpose. I had this particular issue a while back, and when I was called up to Massachusetts to take a look at this, you know when you get a brain fart, and obviously you can see I'm getting old and tired. In fact, I'm only working on 2 hours sleep today. At any rate, I said, boy, I wish I was back in New York. In my box, I keep a little notebook. Because you know those cars that bite you in the butt? When something bites me, guess what? I don't like getting bit twice. Not a good idea. I don't get paid to get bit twice. So I'll write a note down, and I couldn't remember it. I'll be honest with you, I went on my smartphone, I looked and went the IATN first, which is a phenomenal resource. I'm sure we have a lot of IATN members out there. They didn't have anything. I said, you know what? Let me sign in on my Identifix account. Okay? And this is years ago. I signed into my Identifix account and watch what I found. I thought I came across this problem before, like I just told you. Couldn't recall the fix. I used the good tool, Identifix, to find the information. Look at this. You can see, it's old. There's my name. Okay? I did this and looked at it. Look at this. 96 to 98, Proteges, 1518. Oh, that was just like the car I'm working on. The readiness monitors will not reset. Now, it wasn't throwing parts at the car that makes it do it, and I knew it was something stupid. And when I realized something stupid, something that wasn't really hard, but I couldn't remember what that was. You know, mechanics like screwing things, don't they? We're good at screwing stuff. When they put that little yellow, you remember the yellow little stuff they put on the screws? There's almost like a wax thing tell you, don't turn the screw. We didn't listen, we turned the screw. Then they put a plastic cap. Whoa, don't turn the plastic cap. What did the guys do? Broke the plastic cap. Then they thought they really had us. They put metal plugs. Oh, didn't matter anyway. Metal plugs, we were able to get those things out, right? And I'm talking not only on carburetors, I'm talking about air bleed systems like these on throttle bodies. Okay? Even the old mechanical fuel distributors, if you remember, with your little T Allen key, when we used to set up the old European type of fuel distributors. We drilled everything out. Don't do that. Stop, stop, stop. You don't turn screws. And by the way, when I see there's no screws, people take vice grips or something and bend things to change the idle. If you bend things to change idle, you're screwing everything up. You didn't find the root cause. Usually, you have something like pirated air. We all should remember that on a system that uses a mass airflow sensor, it doesn't like leaks, especially on, let's say, European cars. Have you seen dipsticks that looks like they have a bunch of rubber on the end of them, right? And they have oil caps. If an oil cap's off on a Porsche, for argument's sake, it may not start up. Guess what? They're kind of telling you something, that you can't have leaks. A PCV system, let's say like a Volvo with the flame arrestor, which they have information on Identifix on. That flame arrestor gets clogged. It's like our PCV valve, okay? Positive crankcase ventilation is PCV. Like the valve, when the screen gets clogged, you hear this big boom. The plug comes out of the head, hits the firewall, it's a smoke show, oil's blowing all over the place. Okay? Well, guess what? We're not going to start adjusting stuff. And I've seen people do that. For main, rear mains, front main seals, problems, they start adjusting the idle to get the vehicle going. Well, someone must have monkeyed with this car, and the idle was not bad. I swear to God, this thing did not idle bad at all. It looked about 700 RPMs, which we would say is normal, correct? You all agree with me? Shake your heads out there in internet land. Sure, we all agree. Now, that being said, we looked at this, and look at this. It says symptom, emissions, PCM, or fuel. Monitors won't reset. Problem, the base idle is out of adjustment and preventing the ECM, engine control module, from running the readiness test. And you go, get out of here. No, this is real. This is not a get out of here. It tells you, use a scan tool or multimeter to check the air control valve. And it goes in on how to adjust it, looking for a duty cycle with a meter. Or they have another one in here on other vehicles like Nissans or anyone that used an air bleed like that, that you lightly seat the screw. Remember like we used to do carburetors? Half a turn, 1 turn, lightly seat it, and then come out about 3.5 turns. Well, no BS. I drove this vehicle, and guess what? Those monitors went to red. All because of a screw. So all the stuff that was done prior, even by the dealer, because this was maybe 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So you could tell that a 98 or 96 Protege is not relatively new 5 years ago, correct? And what do dealer techs usually do? And nothing against dealer techs, but they sometimes forget because they're working on all new stuff. Just like when I worked for the dealer, I worked on all new cars. Yeah, you got a couple of cars that were 3, 4 years old, and once in a blue moon, a real old car. But overall, you didn't get that, did you? You got all of these new cars. So sometimes they forget, just like I can remember a silly thing like turning a screw. That's probably because I don't like screwing things too much. You know what I mean. Okay, so any questions on that? I'm trying to make this fun and keep myself awake. You know, I had to fly in from Canada today and then do this. So,
Okay, wait.
oh, we do have something. Question?
Would this 25% duty cycle value mean described in the monitor running criteria?
Ah, good question. This 25% duty cycle that's in here, would this be in the monitor criteria? I doubt it. I doubt it. It would not be there. But you got to remember, there's something assume. The word assume, ask out of you and me. The word assume is very, very important because it assumes no one screwed with stuff. But what happens? Someone likes turning screws. And we've all seen this, haven't we? We probably even all did it. I'm going to tell you, did I turn screws? Sure. You know, some people go, hey, you know a lot. You know everything. I said, no, you were right the first time. I know a lot. You know, I go by the name G that people called me for years. I got a half an O. If I ever got the other half an O and D, I'd be God. And I'm not God by far. No one is except God. So I don't know everything and no one else knows everything. We learn off each other. So please keep that in mind. I don't believe that would be in there. Any other questions? And thank you for your comments and questions. It makes my life easier and makes me think of a couple of different things. So again, very simply, this monitor was able to run right after using Identifix. And that's one they didn't have me put in. This is mine. I put this in because it works. And there's the setup, and there's the little bleed screw, okay? Right there. There's the picture of the car worked on. You can tell it's old. Right there where we're supposed to have a little cover. You don't have that screen?
No.
Click again.
Here it is.
Yeah. So you guys should be able to see that. I'm pointing right there to the bleed. And by the way, when they don't have bleeds, again, or screws here, that's where we have the little yellow stuff. People bend the tabs. I've seen it all the time. Okay. So, seat of the pants. Remember we always have like seat of the pants things? Turn that screw all the way in if you can't get monitors to run. Let's say you don't know how to use your meter to do duty cycle. But the idle is you're not going to see a big difference. You are not going to see a big difference, I'm going to tell you that. You wouldn't notice the difference. But turn it in all the way till it's lightly seated, and we come out how far? About 3.5 turns. And then monitors will go. All right, let's look at this one here. And I think the gentleman who, this is my chiropractor's car, years back, Dr. Joe. And Dr. Joe brought his car in a 2005 VW Passat. And this little part right here, that little nipple, that little elbow, is a problem on these cars. They break. And when they break, so I'm talking about this part. You have that screenshot up for them, right? So right here, I didn't circle it for you, because I just had to do that tonight. And here I used the common scan. This was the Hyundai Kia factory tool. Still, some of these available. They no longer make it, but you can get this. And I think it's a great tool. Because look at this. Not only did it give me the manufacturer codes, it told me this vehicle had some sort of ignition distributor type of problem, because the idle was going to go erratic, all from that. Heating current circuit, it did have a bad O2 heater. Long-term fuel trim, add fuel. Too lean, okay, and O2 control system, too lean would be another one. So 5 DTCs on this car. 5 diagnostic trouble codes that I pulled up on this tool. Now, I always say, where do you go? Well, if we go back to that nipple for a second, you know, when you got a lean condition, we have what type of command? It's like a seesaw. Lean condition, rich command, right? Rich condition, lean command. So it's like a seesaw, correct? Well, that seesaw, when I want to check this out, I could start using propane. I could see if that changes my fuel trim, short term. I could, if I'm smart working on a Volkswagen, I'm going to use my smoke machine. I'm going to pull the smoke wizard out and smoke this baby, and guess what? I'm going to find smoke coming right out of there without a problem. You know, you can work as hard or as easy as you'd like, okay? You know, one of the other examples why I'm thinking this with a smoke machine, how many of you have come across a P0171 that is on a Ford vehicle? Pretty common, right? On some of those 5.4s, yeah, some of them are the PCV hose or elbows. Some of them are actually the intake manifold gaskets. And those intake manifold gaskets tend to go quite a bit, don't they? It's a composite manifold, and if you were looking with carburetor cleaner like some guys do, spraying carburetor cleaner all over, which could be dangerous and flammable, right? Or propane, but you know the important thing they forgot? Is the point I want to get across here? They should have been looking at freeze frame data. Because freeze frame data would have told them, guess what? It happened when the engine was cold. Does that make sense? Only happened cold. Why are you running this car hot? You should have smoked it, is how I remembered that right now. Smoked the manifold, and guess what? When you smoked that engine, you would have seen that the gasket was bad and smoke was coming out. As soon as you started the engine up and it went to temperature, guess what happened? You sealed the whole thing up. And now you can do that all day long, and then you're never going to find a problem. So, just a tidbit. So now, back to the Volkswagen. Okay. We look at all these codes. When I see a lot of codes, do not become just a parts changer. We're technicians, we're mechanics, we're guys that got to diagnose stuff, right? Don't throw parts at a vehicle. Make sure you diagnose it. There's always a reason for the lean or whatever. Then let's take a peek. Go to Identifix. Identifix as well will give you all these codes. It'll tell you broken line, cracked line, and give you all the information of stuff we just went over. Now, I just happen to do a lot of Volkswagens. I'll be honest with you, I didn't have to use this for this car, but how many people don't work on a European car out there? A lot of yous. You know, and Volkswagens are becoming more and more popular, but maybe you're not a Volkswagen shop. Maybe you do a lot of domestic stuff or Asian stuff. This comes in your shop, and this is why I put all different stuff in here besides just Asian. Okay? Something comes in your shop, guess what? This thing is like, hey, remember, the important tools, the brain, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands. After I do my preliminary check, question the customer, I'm going to Identifix. I'm going to pop that in, and I pick the car, I pick the engine package, and probably hard for you to see. Can they see that number? That's a manufacturer DTC I put in here. I think it's the one off the scan tool, so I got to go back because I can't tell. Oh, Oh, it's this, it's the 1655, I think I put in there, 16555, yep, 16555. It automatically pulled it up and converted it to a P0171. That's what I told you guys earlier. So, that being said, this is phenomenal information if you're not used to these cars, or any car. And come on, you can't know everything. This is years and years of databases of information that Identifix has put together. They're also on the OTC scan tool, okay? And I believe they're going on the launch scan tool soon. It's information. You don't get as much on the scan tool as if you subscribe and have this thing online, which is phenomenal. You look at every car comes in. This doesn't cost you money. This makes you money. Remember I told you in the beginning, we're going to save time, make money, get productivity up. You'd be looking quite a while for this thing. I'm going to tell you right now. You wouldn't find that because guess what? The head technician at my son's shop, he was looking and thinking he was going to order some parts. And I said, hold on. Let me take a look at this. Here's where we usually have a problem. And then I showed him, well, you know what? When I'm not around, you need to go to Identifix. Because look at this. If you would have put it in, it'd save you a lot of time. And maybe if I wasn't here, and come on, we're all good, honest guys. You know, we get a bad rap out there. We do our job the best we can do. We sometimes make mistakes. A mistake is not looking information up. And that's what he made. My son is really wacky running his shop. He's so honest, it's scary honest. Okay? I mean, even when a customer has a rusted bolt, something breaks, I'm like, Craig, should have told the guy, you have a rusted bolt, man, you got to charge him for it. Okay? If it breaks, not your fault, it rusted there. No, Craig doesn't operate that way. He's super honest, he'll give the guy the bolt and the time to drill it out for nothing. So if you need your car fixed somewhere, bring it to Craig. I'm only kidding. But you get the idea. He's not there to rip anyone off. So this becomes helpful, and he has his own subscription, by the way. Okay? His car clinic has its own subscription. And here we go into it. Look at all of the confirmed fixes. All of these things here. And possible causes. You know, a plugged orifice thing, a failed sensor, a terminal thing. Oh, excuse me. Beside, I went to the wrong thing. A broken line. I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry about that. A cracked line. It gives you the information to fix it. It's that easy. So let's go off here. Let's go to domestic, because you go, I don't care. I don't work on that. Well, I'm going to give you a 2006 Ford F-150 Misfire. Oh, you never had one of those come in your shop, right? Sure. Okay. Well, let's take a peek at it. Ford Misfire, and all I got to do is type the word Misfire in here. So Ford Misfire comes up with, these are Misfire codes. Well, we all know what the Misfire codes are. We can get random Misfire, we can get a whole bunch, and if we're talking about an F-150, you're usually looking at a 5.4. The failed crankshaft position sensor can give us that. A tone ring, damage, a misadjusted timing chain, failed timing chain tensioner, all these happen. Variable valve timing solenoid, variable valve camming solenoid circuit, oil orifice. Well, guess what? You know, Plymouth is no longer in business, right? Well, people are still using the wrong oil, and these are high failure rates when the wrong oil goes in. Not only will you get a misfire, but you're going to do some severe engine damage. I'm going to give you a couple of tidbits of information. If you own the Ford IDS, the Ford Factory Scan Tool, phenomenal. I plug it into the Diagnostic link connector, I run something called relative compression, and I can see if I have a problem. You don't have that. Well, I'm going to show you something else. And a lot of scan tools are starting to do this. I'm going to give you the example of the OTC. They are mimicking what the factory tool does now. And what do I mean by that? Well, I want to know what cylinders are misfiring. So after looking at all this information here, it goes on and on about oil and variable valve timing. You can see off my OTC scan tool, the Genesis, you see these misfires going on? It should be a nice steady line. This is the misfire graph, and there's the firing order, 137, 265, 48. It gives you that. It knows what car you selected, just like the factory tool. So we could confirm, yes, I do have a misfire. It's not that you're not seeing this. We can go into misfire scan data, okay? But I always want to make sure first that when I do power balance, if I see I have any problems. If I got a mechanical problem, stop putting parts in a car. That'd be like the ceiling here is falling down. If my walls are bad, I put a new ceiling up, it's still going to fall down, correct? So I need to fix the basics first. If I got an engine problem, I need to fix that first before I throw mass air at it. Oxygen sensors. And believe me, you know, I don't run a shop, I run a training center, and I get guys like you that bring me problem cars. And when I see these things, I'm like, you got to stay back a little bit. You got to stop and look at it and say, I better check the basics. You all used big box scopes years back. The Sun, the Bear, the Allen, the Marquette, and it always had you check the basics. We think the scan tool is the greatest tool in the world. And not that it's bad, but you can't skip over the basics, whether it be the battery or in this case, the engine. So let's take a look. And do we have any questions there? None, okay. So here, this engine had to come apart. The customer used a K&N. Nothing wrong with K&N, providing you don't over-oil them. They happen to be good filters, but if you over-oil them. And if you put your eyes over here, you can see the variable valve timing. This solenoid right here, that controls oil going through. And these things here called the phases, have a big, big problem. Phases cannot operate correctly. Did you hear me? Cannot operate correctly if we don't have the right oil going through these passages. So why are you using 1040 or 1030 if this calls for 520? This does damage to these motors. And when you take this whole cover apart, there's chain adjusters and slockers over here. They start wearing out and falling apart, and then in the pan, you're going to get all the debris from all of that piece of adjuster coming off, clogging the screen up, making this thing run worse and worse. And this is an expensive motor to fix. In fact, a lot of guys are not doing phases and solenoids. They're just selling someone a rebuilt motor. Okay? And that's very expensive. If you looked at Identifix and you knew it was an oil problem, well, you can even tell your customer, hey, look, there's a lot of these cars with oil problems. You need to put the right oil in. And if you work for a dealer, you know what I'm going to say. The right filter. You should be using a Motorcraft filter in there. Okay? You know, they'll tell you that's the best filter. By the way, that Motorcraft filter is made by Fram. You may have remembered when we interviewed the Fram engineer. So Fram actually makes the Motorcraft filter. Also, Wix is a good filter. But I'm going to stop there because we don't know what other stuff is out there. Poor filters cause problems that get up here into the solenoid and into the phaser, and then you got a problem. Okay? Then you have a problem. Question?
What brand of oil can you use on this project?
Ah, brand of oil. Well, I'm going to go to brand. And I can do a whole class for hours upon hours on oil. I'm going to go to weight and specification. I'm going to look for the Ford specification that is in the owner's manual. So even if it says it's a 520, I'm not just going to put a 520 in. I'm going to look at, does it have the Ford specification, usually a big number on the bottle, the back of the bottle. It'll say like FD15 something or another, or whatever the numbering system may be. You can find that out right in your owner's manual. So that's what I would use. I would use the manufacturer recommended oil. Now, if you want brands, you can pick any brand you want. I'm not going to get in and do a commercial for different brand oils. You know, personally, I'll tell you personally, I like Pennzoil. How's that? Okay. But you can use whatever brand you want. Doesn't matter. As long as it meets the spec. Any other questions? Okay. So now, here's the new phaser installed. You can see the difference. You know, this one's all beaten up. It's all varnished. And this guy had some severe problems. The oil pan had to come down on this vehicle as well. Okay, because there was so much debris. And I apologize, I couldn't find the shot in time. of the chains being so messed up and the slackers where Alex had to rip the whole front wheel, it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, the whole four-wheel front wheel drive part of it down to get this damn oil pan down. And there was gook in there that you wouldn't believe. Had to pack the oil pump up, clean the whole screen out and pack the baby up, get new oil in it and get it rolling. And it winded up running good. It did take a while to get rid of misfires. Lucky there was no severe damage. And again, some people wind up going too far and there's severe damage. This guy came real close, by the way, to actually doing severe damage. So there's the new phaser, there's the new solenoid, and you can see the solenoid bolts into the head. All the passages also had to be cleaned out because oil flow is important, just like Identifix says. And there, the tensioner goes down against the chain. And, for you guys that are not sure how this works, when oil pressure comes through, an electrical signal from the computer, adjust the timing. This is how we adjust the timing, by the phaser doing this.
Question.
Yes?
Other than Identifix, is there a shorter way to come to the conclusion that was the oil phasers causing the misfire?
The question was, other than Identifix, is there a shorter way or another way to come to the conclusion that the phasers are a problem? Well, you're going to get some loss of power, misfires. If you have bidirectional control, where you can actually change the oil flow, make the solenoids move so the phases actually move, that'd be one way to see if they're actually operating. Caution, caution, caution. How do you know it really has the right oil in there? So if it comes in with a problem like misfires, or you're not sure if the phases are actually working or not working, you could even take something like a power probe if you didn't have bidirectional control, and I caution you there. Let's go back a second to the phaser and the solenoid. You notice the solenoid has a few wires going in, right? We'd have to find which one's power, which one's ground, and we could put a power probe there, which is going to change the oil flow, which is going to allow the phaser to move. We could see stuff on our scan tool, whether it has timing degrees or different degrees of advance, okay, which is more common. We could see if timing is advanced or retarded. If you could do it through your scan tool, it's that much better, but have you noticed when you go into bidirectional control, wouldn't you like to see that when you command this thing to state that the timing, they actually showed you those parameters? Well, sometimes they don't. So what I'll do at other times, if the tool doesn't have it, if I'm not using my IDS, then I'm going to basically maybe throw a power probe on there and look at, when I'm applying ground to it, what's going on, or power and ground. I basically disconnect this with the key off from the engine, start it back up, and I'll play Mr. Computer. I will adjust this. And caution, over adjusting it or under adjusting it. Next question.
Would this fail a Ford KOER self-test?
Would this fail a KOER, key on engine running, or KOEO, key on engine off? Possibly. Possibly. I ran the test on that, but I've had quite a few of these. I don't remember. What I have seen, and I didn't put in here, is the power balance test from the IDS that'll actually show you that you have a whole bank going down. Now, what do I mean by a whole bank? This is the left side, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 5C cylinders 5, 6, 7, 8 are bad. The phaser on that side is most likely a problem. Pretty common, by the way. And if I see it on bank 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4, same thing. It's usually easy to find. So yeah, you can do it that way, but Identifix at least gives you some information, because the customer is not going to believe you, right? One of the things I learned early on years back is that when I use the big box scope, the Sun or the Bear machine, and even when I used Allen, they gave me pieces of paper that printed out. Not my early scopes, but the later ones gave me paper. It made me money when the paper came out and said, the computer has determined this is the problem. Well, if you use Identifix correctly, besides the parts, labor, and other stuff that it has, if you use it correctly, guess what? You're going to give it to the customer and it's going to be believable. So while Doreen's looking for a question, I want to show you something before we go to the next slide here. I'm going to go to Identifix that I pulled up, and I'm just going to pull a GM vehicle up, and let's go to something new. I'm going to go to 2011 Chevy. And I'm going to push their system hard. Chevy Volt. I had one. What a great car. Now I've got a 2013. So a commercial for Chevy. How's that? I'm going to select the vehicle. And what happened to my internet connection? There we go. And now I could come up with, look at this information. I could punch a code right in here, so if I wanted to put in P0300, it loads it up. So this is live. I'm doing this live. And by the way, my internet right here, I have this on wireless, and it must be pretty slow. It usually does not take this long. And it comes up, and it can give us the information below if it had any of these problems. So we can look at ECM, rack and pinion. We got 331 TSPs on this car. 48 motor specifications. So we look at specifications. You got brake specifications, engine sensor specifications. Look at all the stuff that came up instantly. That's pretty neat, right? Let me show you more stuff here. I'm going to have my back to you, so Doreen will have this on the screen. I could go into DTC information on the OE side of GM, hybrid coolant system. This is factory information you're looking at. Diagnose the system, and now it's working quicker. My internet, I guess the Taekwondo class, all the people went home that were playing on the internet. I could zoom this up, as you can see. I can make it smaller, all in there. I could look at reset maintenance oil indicator. So it gives us the oil life, how to reset it, 100% oil life. And this, by the way, this is really helpful, isn't it? This saves you a lot of time on looking stuff up. And we only have a few more minutes with you, so I want to make sure I touch on a couple other things here. Component location. So if you want to know where the center console, what components are there, here's all the information. I want to see the automatic transmission, the 4ET50. Electric unit, all of the stuff the dealer's looking at. And you could blow this up. You can see the words getting bigger or make it smaller. You can do how to repair something if you're not used to how to repair something. You can click on that. And it'll give you the OE, how to do this flat rate repair, lifting and jacking general information for this car, especially since it's a electric extended range vehicle. Okay, and let me give you one more. And Doreen is looking at questions. I could take them. Let's look at Let's look at fluids. Besides the factory wiring diagrams that are there, so we could see different fluids, different information, hydraulic diagrams for the transmission. By the way, it's also a great learning tool when you have all this information. I always like when someone reads up on something. So remember, for domestic, Asian, and European vehicles, Identifix has you covered. They got you covered with all this info. And let's look at one last thing. You want maintenance schedules. You want to give this to your customer. So now when they come in for maintenance, you should be able to get the maintenance schedule out of it. My computer is taking time. Just give it a second, it's going to pop up. Do we have a question while we're waiting for this?
Well, someone asked, how do you typically charge for diagnostic time to the customer?
Well, I don't run a shop anymore, but I'll tell you what I did about 12, 13 years ago. What I did in New York State here, we have to post your sign. I forgot, my son is probably about, that's correct, 1.4, 1.10, somewhere. I was $93 an hour, but for diagnostics, I had to sign up, it was $193. The $193 basically gave them a full diagnostics of their vehicle with printed results, TSBs. Back then, by the way, Identifix I used to use through the Napa program, and it was in a big book. It had a book where we used to use the phone to call them, and it would give you the fix when you called in on a particular Identifix fix number or something, they called it. And I would explain to the customer that, you know, my time, my expertise, and my information systems is all what I'm charging this money for. I test, I don't guess. So, you know, not that I want to get into pricing because that's a whole illegal thing. I said that's what I used to charge. So I still look at stuff, and when other shops bring me stuff, you know I'm looking at Identifix. And I would say most of my students, and a lot of you guys that are on the internet, I've seen names before, you know me. And you know that I'm not BSing you when I say, hey, I use Identifix, because many of you guys, when you've seen it from me, you bought Identifix. We use it all the time. So look at the chart. We can go down, show them the OE schedules and stuff. Pretty neat. You can go in and show them, you know, even a technician plan. You know, what the technician does. Look at all the OE stuff here. Okay. There's a lot of good information. So with that being said, because we're running out of time, I do want to cover a couple of last things here and tell you, for you guys that don't have Identifix, here's the deal. If you call up, and that's 1-855-270-5857, and mention redeem code ATTS, so you call them up, you get someone on the phone, ATTS, you could test drive Identifix free for 1 week. If you use it free for 1 week and you really like this thing, which I know you will, you're going to keep it. Okay? Now, I'm not in the management business, but like anything, if you use this on every car, you're going to make money off it. And it's going to save you time and build productivity up. Okay? So I strongly recommend, again, 1-855-270-5857. Call in, get 1 week of Identifix for free, and mention code ATTS. One more time, in case you didn't hear me. See, now I make a commercial for you. 1-855-270-5857. Mention the code for 1 free week, ATTS. Now, TST, we're a non-for-profit group, 501c3. I know many of you get all our different emails and stuff, and we do thank you coming back time to time. We do TST roundtables, which is discussions with different people in the industry, different problems, some of your problems that you call in with. We also have live events meaning a 3.5, 4-hour training seminar. March the 23rd coming up is our TST, I think it's 10th annual big event. We have John Thornton, Dave DeCourcy, Pete Meyer, all doing some classes, and guess what? It's a full day of training, and yes, you can view it on the internet. You can download this big manual. Oh, remind me about Sherwood from Georgia, about a manual before I forget. See, I just threw that right in there anyway. At any rate, you could even purchase the manual or DVD, and we're a 501c3, education approved, non-for-profit group. And then my company, if you're interested, here's the buildings we're in, goes a little further over, ATTS, Automotive Technician Training Services. We supply training to a lot of different states, individual technicians, repair shops, associations, and so on. So for Identifix and ATTS and TST, I'd like to thank you for coming out, spending your time with us. If you have any questions, you could surely get us either at the phone number I gave you before, phone number's up here, and I'll go back to the Identifix one, just so you have it. And also, if you go to YouTube, YOUTUBE, and type in TSTSEMINARS space, we'll give you one with P0171. We have about 105 videos up there. You're more than welcome to look at it. So again, that is TSTSEMINARS P0 space P0171. So again, on behalf of Identifix, I'm G. Trulia for ATTS and TST. Thank you and good night.